Right? You got another way to find or no?
Nah.
Okay. All right. Well, you can see on the screen. You see where it say live comments. You see that?
Nope.
You don't got it. You can see the comments on your screen. It say live comments.
No, I
On your
can't see
phone.
it. I can't see it because of the way that the phone is.
Oh, okay. All right.
We'll work it out. We'll work it
All
out.
right. I'll share if it's comments. I'll share the questions, inshallah. So let's open up. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما أسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهه الكريم. So, assalamu alaikum to everyone. I am here with our brother Imam Yusuf Rios, and we're going to have, as the title is, a brotherly dialogue. So we're going to have, hopefully this is one of many continuing conversations, and that we're going to be open. I ask all of you to be respectful to each other, to be respectful even if issues that of disagreement come up, we handle them with al-insaf, with fairness, in equality, being just, right? There is no tashaddud here, no having some strictness where we can't work, right? So inshallah, we're going to open up, we'll dialogue, and I'll let Imam Yusuf begin wherever your thoughts is, wherever they go, and we'll just dialogue. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Great, you're live. We're here. Whatever you got on your mind first, and then I'll put on my mind, because if I lead it, we're going to be all over the place. Go ahead, I'll give you.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. I think that what's on my mind is basically what has been the focus recently is our community, is the survival of our community. Not only its survival, but its flourishing, and to be able to take insight from the past, as the Quran asks us to reflect upon history in many different ways, even to the point where Imam Ibn Khaldun, rahmatullahi alayhi, built a whole system of thought on that concept, on reflecting upon history and decline and revival, and understanding people, even though we know Ibn Khaldun has some issues when it comes to Africans and so on and so forth, despite the debates around that. But that's the focus for me. Like, where is our community going to go? How is it going to flourish in the next 25 years? And it's specific with a extra special emphasis on the Black and the Latino community. Because for such a long time now, there's been a marginalization, whether it's intentional or not, that's a topic to be discussed, but the community has gone into neglect. So that is my concern on two fronts. One is how we operate as Muslims, and also how the non-Muslim community. And that methodology I follow Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz. We should be directed to our community as Muslims and our community as our people.
So let me ask you a question. So if you say these are things you're concerned about, that's obviously, that indicates something. They said fil ishara ibara, when there is an indication, that's in a clear expression. So you're indicating that you were working on that. That means that something's wrong. What do you think the problem is?
I think fundamentally, somewhere along the line within the indigenous Muslim community, we've lost traction. And I've mentioned this on a number of different lives. And I've come to the conclusion after reflection, there's two fronts that have opened up, and those two fronts have created a problem for the rest of the community. When I mean the rest of the community, I'm talking about our community that's not Muslim. Like our contributive factor, our transformative impact, when you take it back to the 80s or the 90s, is missing. And one is because internally there's been a lot of disruption in the Muslim community that has its own causes, its own issues. And two, I'm talking about the indigenous community. And two, what has happened is that there's been, this is a hot button issue, the insertion of some of our Muslim brothers into especially urban areas that are non-indigenous. Their presence has not been productive. It has been caused to destruction on multiple levels, especially destruction to the concept that the community had of Islam, which Islam is liberation, is focus on your issues, focus on the people. And it has created an environment in which now the presence of the Muslim is the one who, is exploitative on multiple fronts, even to the point where we have seen skirmishes across the countries between people from our community, from the non-Muslims and the Muslims, especially the store owners. The videos are out there. We know the stories ourselves. We know the reality. So I think those two fronts have created a dilemma in the whole issue of the Muslims addressing our conditions, right? And then you just have the general problems that are already there in the community. So you have the breakdown on the Muslim side in being able to address the issues, and then you have the weakening of the overall community. You can take that back. Historically, maybe you can say that with the civil rights movement, people going into the middle class and leaving the inner city, that has contributed as well. There's a number of different factors to look at. So that's the dilemma there. I think that we're in survival mode. I think it has genocidal qualities. I think that we're not taking it serious. You know what I'm saying? And I think that we're not contributing anything back in a real sense. Now, that doesn't exclude individuals and small groups. I'm talking about communal impact. I'm talking about the type of vibe that we saw in the 80s and the 90s, where there was a general trend and presence and feeling, that the Muslims were an alternative.
So if you think about this, so you mentioned two aspects. So you mentioned the aspect of the broader community, and I would like to say this, because I grew up in the projects, right, in Atlantic City, among the main rough projects in the city, right? And in our project, from a place called Pitney Village, we were so in Atlantic City, it's well known. We used to be so well known that we used to say, we're not from Atlantic City, we from Pitney, New Jersey. Like, our project was a city in itself. That's how we felt, right? But in that, when you talk about the indigenous community, for us was Black and Spanish, because we were all poor. So we all were in that same project together as really like one family. And that's how we grew up. So we shared the same thing, right? So that's and we suffer the same issue that all of people, non-Muslims, that are indigenous, African Americans, Puerto Ricans. There wasn't many more besides African Americans and Puerto Ricans. We didn't have really other ethnicities like Dominican in our area. It was just African Americans and Puerto Ricans. Still today, it's like that. You know what I mean? In the other projects, ours is gone, but the other projects the same way. So we share in that, right? So that's from the non-Muslim side. But from the Islamic side, it ain't that close, right, among the Muslims. And so we could talk it from just a societal aspect, Black man, Puerto Rican. Let's talk about what we know. We could go all day on that, because we all suffer the same exact circumstances, right? And in fact, for us, we considered that the Puerto Ricans were in a lower class than us, like they had it worse than us. Sometimes how we felt. I'm talking about growing up. This is whether it's reality or not. I'm just telling you the perception we had when we were younger, right? So that mentality of I'm above you, you above me, even came down into the projects. Like we all poor, but we ain't as poor as y'all. Like that type of feeling. So we understand this from that side. Now, as Muslims, I think we could have easily unified on that with ease. Right? I could go into Spanish neighborhoods and easy, right? Imam Amin is here, let's kick it, right? No problem. As Muslims acting in that, I think that's a whole nother story. So I think the easy one, we agree. Remember we was talking about earlier, let's find where we agree. We all agree, we all poor, we all disenfranchised, we all struggling. We can fix that part. We all were victims of the so-called drug war. We know that stuff. That's easy to do. What is preventing us as Muslims is our Islamic issues. So that is a conversation that we need to have. And I say this, we need to have it understanding that the ultimate objective of that discussion is that we can fix a broader problem that even as Muslims, we still suffer it. The Shahada didn't change your social condition.
Right.
In fact, within the new Islam, your social condition is still the same. It just ain't white people over you, it's immigrants.
Or sometimes even worse. Yeah, or sometimes even worse.
Right. So I don't like to beat around the bush, so we go straight to the issue. The issue that I see in now in the Islamic community is a difference. It is the influence of the Salafi Da'wah, which they call it, which I don't hesitate. I said we having a real talk. I consider it the Wahhabi doctrine. I don't use the term Salafi. And there's a historic reason why I do that. Whether someone disagree or not, we can have that discussion. But I don't say Salafi doctrine. I say the Wahhabi doctrine, which some call Salafi doctrine, right? I think that has become in our communities, I ain't talking about every other community, every got different dynamics. In the inner cities, that has become one of our biggest problems. Because prior to the advent of the Salafi Da'wah, I've been in the Islamic movement in the Black community, in our community in the city for 40 years. I took my Shahada when I was 10 years old. So I've seen all this stuff. There was no such thing in the early 80s, mid 80s about Salafiyya as a concept in American communities, in the inner cities, right? That wasn't existing. And we had the differences. Maybe we had groups like Ansar Allah Community, Nation of Islam, Tablighi Jamaat, maybe some Hanafis, Darul Islam in some different places. But the concept of the Salafiyya, it wasn't like available at all. And even if the traces were there that would later become that, it as itself wasn't a divisive factor. That doesn't mean there wasn't division. But so what I'm saying is that I believe is one of our biggest problems because it put in our community the inability to communicate. So we start not even being able to communicate. So if we go both ends, and we can talk about both. My position, I'm Ash'ari in my Aqidah, Shafi'i in fiqh, and I follow the way of the Tasawwuf, right? Make no bones about it. And so there is two extremes. When I mean extremes of trying to get where we get, because it's like warring factions. And now what you mentioned is and I don't believe in ignoring things, because if we ignore it outwardly and we have it inside, it ain't go nowhere. So I say, let's deal with these issues. Let's find a medium ground by which we can build on without running from the issue. I don't want to run from the issue because I don't think we're going to get nowhere if we do that. And let's try to figure out where we work. What you said yesterday, which was strong to me, and I'm going to stop. You said that we have certain principles that we all agree on as Muslims. So I think we should take a minute to, because you said it, I'll let you address what do you think those issues are. And so this is a foundation we can build on. And then after finding what we agree on, let's briefly discuss what we disagree on. I don't know if you got another hour. I do. I can make it, or do you, or we got to stop?
No,
Whatever
you can
time
go.
you got, stop. Because until I got to go, I'll stay with you. So what's your thoughts on what I said? And I'm your brother. You're never going to feel...
I think that I wrote down the point that you mentioned, the issue of the inability to communicate. I'll be honest with you that the inability to communicate, I think that problem was heightened with some of the brothers that committed to the Salafi Dawah that were part of their leadership. Because I don't associate with that type of approach. I'm Athari in Aqidah. You know, I follow Usul al-Fiqh, I'm Usuli in orientation. And I believe in the fundamentals of Tazkiyat an-Nafs. But and primarily I had studied the Maliki madhab, if you want to talk about the Maliki madhab, but other madhab as well. But other than that, outside of that type of stuff, the issue of the inability to communicate. I think that didn't start with the Salafi Dawah. I saw that there, prior to the Salafi Dawah, with the different masajid. You know, sometimes if you took bay'ah to a particular masjid, you shouldn't go to another masjid. That had its pluses and minuses. I think Tablighi Jamaat, prior to the Salafi Dawah, was already laying down that framework of, you know, what is Sunnah, what's not Sunnah, and don't deal with this group, and this group is not, from my experience. I'm talking about solely within the indigenous community, from my experiences in that. I think that the Salafi Dawah came and tried to solve some issues that were there and heightened a lot of problems. And I think that the way that issues were dealt with, it was nasty. You know, I mean, some people may say, well, there were issues that came up before, but if you're claiming to deal with the Sunnah, you understand what I'm saying? And if you're claiming to resolve things with the book and the Sunnah, and you're claiming to have a higher degree of knowledge, there's no reasons for the guns to come out. You understand what I'm saying? It's like, you know, there's a certain methodology, and we know the guns came out. You know what I'm saying? Not only did the guns come out, it became an issue of takfir and all kinds of other issues that came from that. And that's not to say that those things didn't exist, but the oomph and the level and the support that it got with money, and it got with media, it got with a lot of things, it did create an environment at a certain point which was problematic, and it never settled itself. It's not like it settled itself in terms of the Salafi Dawah as a group was against another group, and then it established itself and stabilized the community. That didn't happen. It was a constant internal issue, even internally within the Salafi Dawah. And so why that is, I mean, I think brothers have analyzed that. They go back and forth, whatever. But I think the bottom line that it left not only the inability to communicate, it left an environment which was hostile. It left an environment which was hostile. And for the amount of ahadith and everything that was supposedly coming into the community, the knowledge of the deen became ineffective to be able to even address our issues, whether it was our ability to deal with each other, because internally within the community that split, even within the Salafi Dawah, outside of the Salafi Dawah, and it left us vulnerable to all kinds of social issues, because whatever was created there by the elders, whatever orientation they came from, with the efforts that they made, and this is what I had called the outline of the Sunnah. The outline of the Sunnah was the concept of community service and everything. All of that was destroyed. I don't have a problem putting that on the table. you know, and I think that responsibility should be where it's at. And I think another thing that happened was that it completely undermined any indigenous leadership. Nobody was qualified on any level whatsoever to lead the community, and it put the community in a position where everything went under a certain flag, you know, and that flag happened to be the Saudi flag. You know, that flag happened to be the Saudi flag that was not questioned, and the empowerment of the community went out the door. And I think a lot of us agree on that. I think even those internally that are committed to the Salafi Dawah, they have to admit that that happened to some extent. Some of them do admit, and some of them are still in denial. You know, that's I think that's part of the issue. I don't think it was solely the Salafi Dawah. You know what I'm saying? I think there were other issues that were there, but I think that the Salafi Dawah did heighten it. It contributed its own problems, and it deconstructed whatever was there as far as community is concerned.
Here's why I say, because I'm talking about from experience. There's two things we should consider. And as a person who has done some studying, you can identify certain things easily. Access to Islamic knowledge. For the indigenous community, still to this day, that is not available, like readily accessible, right? There are many deficiencies that we suffer from, that just those deficiencies, without all of the other stuff, is a barrier to learning. Lack of knowledge of the Arabic language. Lack of knowledge to scholarship, in Islamic scholarship. And I don't want to use that word loosely, because I don't. If you mention something about yourself and your methodology, right? You said, in terms of my aqidah, I am athari. That's a technical term with a meaning behind it. Most of our people would have no idea what you're talking about. You got to explain that, what is meant. You say, I have an usuli approach. Most of our people don't even know what you're talking about when you say usuli. What does that mean? So that got to be explained. When you say, I have a acceptance or a leaning to a tazkiyah, most of our people don't even know what tazkiyah is. We're being honest with each other. Now, so words have become, and this happens with Salafiyah, with Ash'ari, with Shafi'i, with Maliki, with Sufi, Ba'alawi, Qadri, Tabliki. All those names represent concepts and meanings. And we have taken names and never understood concepts and meanings. That's why we go from name to name to name to name. This is a constant process of growth in our community. So that's one. Access, information. Then to have an understanding of levels of learning and ability and qualification in all of this stuff. So these are multi-layers that you got to discuss. So I can't have a conversation with someone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, right? Automatically, like, what is the punchline for the average person that comes? What are you upon? What do you mean, what am I upon? You can't just say I'm Muslim, because even saying I'm Muslim now, because of the environment, what type of Muslim are you? And what do you mean by Muslim? Or you went out, or you just went out? Are you still with us? Uh-oh. Oh, you still with us?
Yeah.
Okay. So, right. So we gotta have defining of what we mean. If we're gonna frame a conversation, we gotta know what we're talking about. Because names is going to give perceptions that may be the reality and may not be the reality. So for our community to be fair, the average Muslim has to first understand what we're talking about, right? You mentioned Ibn Khaldun, rahimahullah. I automatically knew what you was talking about. I don't know how much of the listener know who Ibn Khaldun is, or his significance, or his work. So it becomes just names, right? And for us, right, I can give it to a way where we can identify, because we talked about our backgrounds and where we come from. It's like a guy on the block, right? And it happens still today. He's selling drugs, right? He only knows what's in his neighborhood. He doesn't realize that little crack vial in those days, alhamdulillah, it's not like that today. Those few vials of crack, you might as well have 10 keys, 10 kilograms of cocaine. Because if you get caught with that, the time they're going to give you, right, you might as well been a kingpin. And you didn't even have anything. That's a couple vials of crack. Because you don't understand what you're involved in, you're going to do something that's going to be so destructive that you understood you wouldn't have done that. You're not on point. So you have people, many people in our community, Puerto Rican, Spanish, African American, from the inner city that are still doing 20, 30 years for vials of crack in those days. And the root of that was they didn't understand what they was involved in, right? Many, hundreds, thousands. So my point, that's the same thing happening in the deen. We're involved with something. We don't understand what we're involved with. We just got terms. We think we're doing something when really we're so far from the mark. So I think this is an issue that we need to address. Because if not, it's going to be a repeated cycle. So every group, I remember when I was young, Islam was black, right? Black was Islam. You say Islam, it was synonymous with a black person. You talked about Malcolm, and even that was earlier before our time. But even during our time in the 80s, in the early 80s, late 70s, when you said Islam, you meant black. That was synonymous. Then we developed, say, Sabri come in, you have some Sunnah, some Darul Islam, these types of movements, Fuqara Jannah, all over different movements in the inner city. These are what we know. Every movement, and you would agree with this, has its particular things that relate to it that distinguish it from something else. And if you don't have that understanding, you're likely to fall into sectarianism over and over and over again because you have no principles. You follow what I mean? What's your thoughts?
I think that, you talked about access to knowledge and the issue of scholarship and levels of learning. That's why, for me personally, I think that there's a base of Islamic knowledge which is foundational. That base is not disputable, or at least at the point where it is universal enough to be accepted between the different groups. Is not that controversial. And I think that because of the issue of access to knowledge, Arabic, scholarship, and where people are at, that is the foundation that needs to be communicated. Was clear, was understandable, that type of thing is the approach. I think that on the foundational level, with an address to where people's needs are at. And I think that there are literacy obstacles. There are literacy obstacles. I'm gonna tell you, some people in the Latino community, like, if you keep it straight off the rip, they're not going to study. They're not going to study. They may listen to a little bit here, there, whatever, but they're not going to study. That's not the orientation. It's just they're going to take a little bit and they get whatever they can and they just keep moving. And I think a lot of people are on that level. I was in a masjid in Cleveland, Ohio for years. You had older brothers, 60s, 70s. They were not going to study. They may sit for a small class for no longer 15 minutes or whatever, something easy to understand, but they're not going to go into the details of fiqh. They're not going to deal with a lot of the stuff. They just, whatever is most easy for them to understand and practice, they're going to run that. There's people that converted in their old age, same thing. To get them to go into details of this, that's just not going to happen. And so we have people in our community overall that they're not really interested in academics, and neither are they predisposed to academics, and they may be stronger in other areas. And the question is, how is the foundation of the deen going to be laid down for them so they can benefit? You know what I'm saying? And they can go to the next level. There's foundational stuff in Islam that it needs to be communicated. And that's part of the approach that I think that we should have in common, that there's some basic stuff that needs to be taught, and that's about it. And then everything else after that is icing on the cake. And there's some foundational work that needs to be done, in terms of community service that should be universal. And then there's some higher level stuff from that. For me, that part is simple.
So let me ask you a question. So what are those foundational things that we should all agree on that we need to communicate to the masses of our people, right? And what are those issues? So that's one part. And what are those issues that we should reserve for a group of us who can discuss them in the proper manner? It's not the ego, say scholarly, academic, in a proper manner, in a befitting manner that will benefit us, right?
Mm.
How do we distinguish between the two? So what are they, number one? And how do we distinguish between the two to reach your objective?
I think that, I think we're at a point of maturity right now where the community is at, may not have been there before. But I think, learning how to make salah properly, whether you following a madhab or whether you following Sheikh al-Albani, whatever it may be, something at a basic level that's systematic, that's functional. I don't think that we should be blasting each other on that. Because once we make the salah too much of a controversy, then you're making an act of ibadah that's foundational, universal. You're blocking the means to people reaching Allah. I think that there is the usul of iman, some foundational stuff, in Surah Al-Ikhlas. There's some ways to teach Aqidah at a way where we're not going to be going back and forth with each other. Like we can say that it's okay. We can meet eye to eye on that point. And I think that there's some fundamentals in Tazkiyat an-Nafs, if you want to call it tasawwuf, that is agreed upon. That is agreed upon, things that are essential. I think that group that tries to say that any talking about Tazkiyat an-Nafs and all of that, that group needs to be knocked, that make it an issue, they need to be knocked out of the box regardless. Because what they have done to the community is they block them from having a life of the soul. And when you don't have any life of the soul, you're choking the person out. You have to have some way that you're dealing with your heart. And I think there's some fundamentals of purification of the heart without going into, points in which technically here, I'll be very specific, that it's a tremendous issue between Sufis and Salafis, because that's going to be where, this point of difference. I think there's some fundamental ways of dealing with that. I spent like 20 years on thinking on the question, and it's not that I spent 20 years, but it's just, I'm saying it to say that it exists. It exists. There's foundational stuff that exists on all of those levels, on all of those three levels that constitute deen, based on Hadith Jibreel. That the deen is Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. And so I think that type of stuff, we need to agree that, there's a spiritual life, that there's a foundational life of belief. And I think there's things that we've been deprived of as a community, like issues of tafakkur, the issue appreciating the creation of Allah. You know, people talk about Tawheed Rububiyyah, but you never hear any sort of go to AC and, you know, go look at the ocean and see what kind of impact, you know what I'm saying? You know, you have that type of thing. It's just like, it's not there. So I think as far as that, that's foundational. I think the whole issue of how to engage, good character. I don't think we're going to debate on that. You know, the issue of good character. You know what I'm saying? I think people may debate over ahadith and all of that type of stuff, but I think that we can get to a point where there's some neutral base on that stuff, how we communicate that. I think that the issue of the family, you know what I'm saying? I think that's foundational, you know, especially I think we need to have discussions on how we're going to deal with some basic issues of you know, of marriage and divorce. You know what I'm saying? And I think those issues right there, those are foundational issues. You know, you may be able to tack on a few other things like salat, like the importance of the jama'ah and so on and so forth. But I think that those, if we were able to mainstream it and make sure that everybody's on point, at least at that level, you know, brothers claim that they're on point on that level, but when we look, they're not on point on that level. You know what I'm saying? And if you go deep, you begin to see that there are issues. I met somebody that had converted, and this was in Puerto Rico, to give you an example. 5 years supposedly didn't know how to pray, so didn't know how to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. So then the question becomes like, you know, what were you doing with your salah and everything? You know, what were you doing with that? And so I think those foundational things need to be in place, and not to be offensive to brothers and sisters, but all love and respect. We have some people in our community that have been hit with mental health stuff, whether they were impacted by their own volition, the drugs or whatever, or something their parents did, or it's something else, or trauma. And so I think that we have to be careful how we introduce certain things. Just, you know, basic things about how to deal with other Muslims, even the whole issue, you know, you start talking about darb in the Quran, you know, striking your wife, and a brother is not of the right mind, you know what I'm saying? And he made a mess of the situation. And he said, here goes right here. You know what I'm saying? Like, Salah went to Deen. You know, I think that the same thing comes with the issue of brothers that are in the penitentiary. They come. You put certain ayat of the Quran in their hands and certain hadith in their hands. Like one brother that came out for a while, he struggled with that. He said, yo, our practicing deen in the facility is not our reality out here. And see, everybody's not a success story in that. You have a lot of success stories that people are transformed, you know, dynamic miracles on earth. They transform their lives, their lives, but not everybody's like that. Some people, you know, you put certain knowledge in their hands and there's no elevation. It's like, it's destruction with that knowledge. So I think that, you know, there's really what I'm talking about. And I think what you're talking about is what's the educational approach? How are we going to approach education for the whole person? Not just details in Aqidah, but for the whole person, you know. And that's kind of where I'm at, because we don't see that foundation in place, and it's creating a lot of damage. And we're fighting with each other, and we don't have the foundation in place in our community.
You know something, and I'm going to come back to some of those things. I want to ask you a question, because yesterday at the end of your live, I saw you got kind of emotional, right? And honestly, it struck my heart. And I listened to you a lot, right? Because I learned a lot of things from listening to you. I learned to control myself, right? Because you say a lot of things I totally disagree with. I'm talking about from Minhajiyya. That's what I'm talking about. Not what you're talking about. We live the same stuff, so I got it, right? So sometimes we don't have the ability to hear the other one out. We become so narrow-minded that the sticky issue is the only issue to us. And it's not. Right? We have this sticky issue and a million other things that we totally on the same page on. But we'll let that one sticky issue prevent everything, which can cause destruction in the earth, let alone just the community. But so when I listen to you, I say to myself, and I've been wanting to do this for a long time, I said, I gotta let this brother get heard, because a lot of things he's saying we need, but to find the right minds to come together to have these discussions is very difficult, right? So I want to commend you on that. And don't stop what you're doing in terms of trying to push this, because people are listening, even if it don't seem like they're listening. There's a lot of people. So we have, say, 50-something right now, maybe 70-something people listening. But there's people who are listening, but not outwardly. You can't know they're listening, but they're paying attention. They're hearing you out. So be cautious since you have that audience. Be aware that people are listening to all those things that you're talking about. For all of us, we need to be considerate of that. But I'm really like solution oriented, right? All right, I got the point. Now, how are we going to get there? And what are the barriers that get us there? So I'll give you an example. For me, Islamically, when I look at our foundations, we have certain foundations that we must all agree on. And we do in principle, right? But we've let the branches overshadow the root, which happens naturally. If you look at a tree, you just see the form of the tree. None of us, unless we're deep, to wonder how strong are the roots of that tree, right? That's just natural. That's what you see, because we are people of the apparent, right? That's just natural. Nothing blameworthiness. You got to dig a little deeper. So the foundations are important. We, as indigenous Muslims, right? We're victims all the time, across the board, no matter which way you cut it, from someone else's propaganda. It's natural, right? Our job, this is me and you and those like us, is to learn enough of Islam that we can control the narrative that comes in our community. We have that responsibility. In that light, you, me, people like us who are leaders, because I see you got Puerto Rican imams, Imam Yusuf, I put, Imam Amin. We have people who listen to us. We have congregations. It's our responsibility to be responsible.
Right.
You're going to be responsible before Allah anyway. So might as well wake up and realize you better be responsible. And being responsible, you right now have the same responsibility as Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, as every other leader overseas, so-and-so. You have that responsibility in your environment. And everyone protects their home. Everyone, every man. As an imam, you are the man of that house, called masjid, called community center, whatever you want to, that's your job to maintain it. So when I say that, those foundational things, we got to establish. So you mentioned the hadith of Jibreel. So we got Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. Right? And in the prophetic speech, he, salawatullahi wa salam alayhi, is talking about general, not specific.
Right.
This is general, not technical. Right? General. Now, those general things have become technical in terminology, informing ulum, sciences. Right? I'm just talking so we get where we at. If we're going to go back to that foundational thing, we can't go back foundational and still apply branches to a foundation. The foundation is before branches. You follow what I mean? So if we're going to talk about at-tawheed, we can't go talk about at-tawheed, but then make it branches. because that's a foundation, that's a root. At-Tawheed as a root is knowing the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then you got branches on top of that, which we find people discussing. So if you're from the Wahhabi background, you're going to say At-Tawheed is At-Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, Tawheed al-Asma wa Sifat. If you're from the background of the Ash'a'ira wal-Maturidiyya, we're going to say At-Tawheed is knowing what is obligatory for Allah, what is permissible to attribute to Allah, what is impossible, what is obligatory for the Prophet. It's another form, technical, to describe At-Tawheed. So the Asl is Tawheed. Everyone agrees with that, right? No Salafi, no Wahhabi, no Ash'ari, no Maturidi, no Athari is going to deny At-Tawheed as is found in the Quran and the Sunnah, meaning Ayat al-Quraniyya or al-Hadith al-Nabawiyya, right? No one's going to argue with that. What happens is when we make that technical, where we start to disagree. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's no doubt that there's no doubt that there's an issue here. One is an educational issue. You know, even okay, I'll give you a point. I'll give you an example. Say, for instance, even if you were to take the knowledge that comes from Saudi Arabia, if you're a curriculum specialist, then you know what to introduce because you want to bring out an effect, and you know what not to introduce, right? At different levels. If you take, for instance, a book like 200 Questions and Answers in Aqidah by Hafiz al-Hakimi, you bring that in, there's no debating on this sect or that sect or this group or that group. It's just laying out a foundation, and that's it. That type of book is a book which is not throwing you in immediately into sectarian issues. If you know, so that's a concept. If you look at, for instance, even in the Ash'ari school, if you were to take, for instance, if you take something like Risal to Ahl al-Thaqr by Imam al-Ash'ari, or Al-Ibana, even with all the debate, that's a foundational issue which everybody's just like, okay, or maybe on this one point we disagree. And I mentioned that before, even with the issue of Aqidah Tahawiyya, you're going to find that on 1 or 2 points, maybe somebody like Sheikh al-Albani will add some commentary, definition of Iman, something like that. And so there's a way of teaching where it's not so divisive and still is enough. It's like the Qira'at. You go to the Quran and it's like, you're not going to see the Qira'at in the Quran, but everybody that knows the Qira'at, they can go to the Quran, they take their benefit. And so there's a certain foundational way of teaching where it's like, it's general enough for everyone to have a foundation and be able to kind of be like, okay, we're on this, we may differ on this point if they're prepared. Me personally, though, the issue with Islamic scholarship is that you have to know why things were written and the historical time period in which it was written. Because we're not talking about revelation. We're talking about the scholar's reflection on revelation, and a lot of times they're servicing their people on a particular issue and the way that they know how and the way that they're committed to. But my thing is that if we were to start off, say, for instance, with the Meccan Quran, the Meccan revelation, and especially in the order of revelation, how it's coming in, not necessarily housed in the Mus'haf, in the order of revelation, we're having a impact on our people, giving them tools, and then we're monitoring them. Then we can bang out other things on scholarship levels when people are appropriately prepared for that. If I'm going to sit here and argue with you, if I'm going to say, if some of these brothers have come in and immediately they're attacking Ashari Aqidah. The majority of the people, even if they say that they're Ashari, they're not committed Asharis. That's the bottom line. Even if they say that they're Malikis or they're Shafis, they're not committed. They haven't gone through that whole curriculum to really be committed. They're associating, right? But they don't know the technicalities of that stuff. You know what I'm saying? They don't know the technicalities of a lot of it. Just like a lot of the brothers that claim that they're Salafi, they're not going into the depths. If they get beyond Usul al-Thalatha, if they get up to Kitab al-Tawheed, they're not going through some full-blown curriculums. You know what I'm saying? That's just the reality. Our brothers, we need to stop the nonsense. The reality is that people are arguing even without knowledge. If you were to ask them technically, what is your difference with the Asharis? They wouldn't even know how to argue the point. You understand what I'm saying? They will come up and bring things from here, there, what they read in the article. But when we talk about principles or why are there differences, they won't be able to get into that issue. You know what I'm saying? Just the same thing when we talk about the methodology of the different variations in the Ashari school, when we talk about the methodology of Ibn Taymiyyah, so I think the technicalities, anybody that has knowledge and is rooted in knowledge is going to speak with knowledge. And they're going to deal with people with knowledge, even if they differ. Ibn Taymiyyah, when he argued against a particular point, he made sure he understood it, and then he argued the point. Imam al-Ghazali, before he argued against a certain point, made sure he understood it, then he, went out. And, and he had a discussion on those issues. So I think that the tools of scholarship, the way of scholarship is what's missing overall. And brothers who are coming and they're studying and this and that, they're not, first of all, they're violating the maqasid of the Sharia. Because they're not thinking about a community that is giving shelter to people that need refuge. They're thinking about a community that's molded on what my teacher said, or, this is one of the issues that, and I talked to, I had a conversation with a brother about this, and we said he had some issues with me. I'm like, the community that I was in Ohio, in Cleveland, Ohio, one of the masajid there, it was built in an alliance fashion between the Sunnis and the Shia. And it was a small group of the Shia, majority Sunnis. And there were contractual agreements that were made out of respect. The Shia said, we will join you and put our money, help you build the masjid. You guys bring your own imam. We don't even want the minbar. And we agreed to not create another masjid where there's Jum'ah. And then at a certain point, when they went to another city, even far out, and they built their own masjid. When you come into the community, you didn't build that community. You see what I'm saying? You didn't put the effort in that community. You didn't build it. You don't maintain the people. And you come into that community and immediately it's like, I'm taking out the sword of the truth, this group, that group, and you're bringing overseas drama into a community that's not functioning on overseas drama. You see what I'm saying? Overseas drama like Saudi Arabian drama. Saudi Arabian, Yemeni, Iranian drama to a masjid in North America. In a community that there's an agreement between the people how we're going to function. Even in Dearborn, Michigan, where it has a predominantly Shia population, the leadership made an agreement. We're not going to bring the drama from overseas here. And so when you have that type of approach, is sectarian in that way, that you're violating some fundamentals of the deen. Now and the outcome of that type of stuff, people's Ramadan was messed up. People got sued. People were leaving the masjid. You understand what I'm saying? Over that type of drama. So there's certain things that, like the way that people are teaching, there's certain debates that is a time to have, and then there's consequences when you push certain things in a certain way. And so we're not in an Islamic government. You know what I'm saying? We're not enforcing anything on anybody. People here are practicing out of their own volition, their own free will. And so you have to understand that space. We're not in Saudi Arabia. Even in Saudi Arabia themselves, if the government went off and they started wiping out the Shia, or they went to Ahsat and they started hitting on the Sufis or this and that, you talk about internal chaos. That's not even a concept of leadership. So our brothers, you know, they sometimes the way that they think about things is they don't look at the well-being of the human being. So they destroy your space. So how are you protecting the objective of the Sharia, where you can have a space where people can worship Allah? We say we're protecting the deen, but then we're undermining the masjid. You know, we say that we believe in the deen and the sunnah, but then the dignity of the human being is not upheld. That we you know, when we talk about the intellect, preservation of the intellect, if you're going to create a fitna out of people understanding the deen, you're going to cloud their head. You know, so there's things that are going on the way that imams, mashaykh, students of knowledge, whatever you want to call it, they lack in understanding the principles of da'wah. And they claim that they're doing da'wah, but they lack in understanding the principles of da'wah. And so the outcome of that is the destruction of communities. When you start talking, and that example is a suburban masjid, and there's many suburban masjids that have fallen out off of this orientation. But when it comes to our people, you know, how is it then that the deen is helping us to emerge? We have a case where the mom is telling the child everything is haram based on I'm on the minhaj. You understand what I'm saying? And so her son is growing up in that mindset, everything's haram. How does your son want to function? And so this is the type of concept that we have that has been communicated to some of our sisters. You know, things that are not practical in terms of functionality in life, religiosity that's not liberating, that's not helping. You know what I'm saying? When we have the average Muslim just concerned with going back and forth, no relationship with the Quran, no relationship with ibadah, no relationship with it, and that's the issue that I'm, you know, trying to say. We should be responsible enough to move away from that, and technicalities in academics and scholarship. It has value, it has its weight, but we should know that there's a time and a space for that. The average person has not developed the skill set to deal with that stuff. It's no offense to anybody, but somebody's going to talk to me about the Ashari and Ibn Taymiyyah debate. If you can't sit there and quote imams in the Arabic language that are debating whether metaphor exists or metaphor does not exist, you understand what I'm saying? Then that becomes a problem. If you can't see that on some things Ibn Taymiyyah overlaps with the Maturidi Aqidah, you know, then it's like, what's the discussion? There's no room for discussion because you don't know where there's common ground, where there's difference, where there's agreement. Ibn Taymiyyah didn't disagree with all of the Sufis. You know what I'm saying? There's fundamental things with Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim agree with the Sufis. Just because Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab took a different approach. You see what I'm saying? So the level of knowledge that's necessary to navigate what you want to navigate, you know, as far as these issues, most of these brothers are not qualified to do that. Most of them are not qualified to do that. They haven't been prepared to do that. You know what I'm saying? And neither have they been prepared to deal with community issues. You know, and that's the dilemma that I have on a personal level. When I'm watching brothers collapse and we don't have any way to deal with that, and we're stuck on this other stuff, you know, which we really can't resolve because it's not really knowledge based. It's not like we're going to sit down and be like, yo, Akhi, the point that you mentioned, you know, is related to the Arabic language of Akhi, you know, the hadith can be understood in 5 different ways. Imam so-and-so, he said this point. That's not how they roll it. That's not how our community is rolling. You know what I'm saying? So that's why the academic stuff becomes somewhat troublesome for me, because what we're doing is we're firing up a sectarian type of environment, and the community is lost.
Let me ask you a question, though. And I agree with that to an extent as a generality, right? But in specifics, I listen to you talk, right? I'm going to be honest with you. And because I love you, it's easy to talk to you. Really, I like you. I like you a lot, right? So I won't pick you apart. Do you understand my point? Because I like you. I have a love for you. So it's not like which, because I'm trying to reason with you. I want us to get to an understanding, right? Because I believe what you intend is good. And I'm missing some of what you have, and you're missing some of what I have. If we put that thing together, watch out, right? I believe that. So now I'm going to attack you. So right now, what you know?
Go ahead, no problem.
Yeah, right. If we're going to say that truly, I listen to you, right? And I watch you use a bunch of branches to overshadow the root, right? Ibn Taymiyyah, branch, right? That's a branch. He's not a root, right? Ibn al-Qayyim is a branch. He's not a root. Imam al-Ash'ari is a branch. He's not a root. What do I mean by that? Whenever you're discussing them, you're talking about branches, and whenever you're talking the basics of Al-Quran and As-Sunnah, Ayatul Quraniyah, wal Hadith al-Nabawiyah, verses of the Quran, and Hadith of the Prophet, you're talking about roots, right?
You agree.
If you look at the root, because when you talk about branches, you've already altered the root. Do you understand my point? If you said to me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about at-tawheed in the Quran, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدْ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ, to the end of the surah. Or you said, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ, and left it, me and you ain't gonna never argue. Because we stuck to the root, right? Once you go beyond the root to the branch, now you're talking about the explanation or the details of how the root develops into a tree, right? We need to first make sure we have sound roots before we start talking about the tree, right? So for instance, I'm going to go into the root. The difference between the Wahhabiyya, Salafiyya, Athariyya, Ash'ariyya, Maturidiyya, Ashia, add whoever you want, right? It's in branches, not roots. It's not in branches. I'll give you an example. Quickly, in the briefest way you can explain me Athari Aqidah. In the briefest way. No more than 2 minutes.
Hadith base. Is hadith base?
Explain what you mean.
Is hadith base? Hadith base Aqidah.
What does that mean?
It means that it's an approach to Aqidah, which focuses is as simplistic as possible. It's not using a lot of philosophical debate to argue certain points. That doesn't mean it doesn't have that in it, but the foundation is keep to what's clear as much as possible.
Give me an example.
Give you an example. You talk about, for instance.
Listen, we've already established our brotherhood, so you can just talk.
No, I mean, you talk about, because there's different ways of presenting that.
Let's deal with a base, so we don't be all over the place. Give me an example.
But see here, like I told you, the base initially that I started from. I said the base initially from an educational perspective. I said the issue of the Meccan Quran, that we should start off with that.
Okay.
And I said that we should start off with that, and we should start off with that according to the order of revelation, how it came to the first generation, not how it was in the Musaf. And so then I set that aside because I thought, that was that's from the usul, from the usul. You know what I'm saying? If we want to talk about sources. Now, when we talk about the other stuff, there's a few different approaches to that. Whether it's you're talking about Ibn Qudama, whether you're talking about Abi Zayd, whether you're talking about Bayhaqi.
You heard what I said? Right. Stop talking about branch.
We agree, but we agree with that. But when you start talking about, it's easy when you start talking about hadith-based aqidah, there's going to be some sources that you go to, whether it's Kitab al-Imam, Bukhari, or whatever it may be.
That's branches. That's branches.
It's not branches because you're talking about You asked me, is hadith based aqidah? I have to give you somewhere to go.
All right, stop. If you're talking about Kitab al-Iman and al-Bukhari, let's so we follow each other so we can get the roots. Bukhari himself, rahimahullah, is a branch. Would you agree? Kitab Sahih al-Bukhari is the branch.
Now we're getting into the issue of method. That's why I pointed
That's
out.
Not madhab.
Huh?
That's not madhab. We follow Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not Imam al-Bukhari.
There's no problem with that, but I said hadith based aqidah. Where do you start? Where do you start from?
Here's what I'm saying to you. If we're saying the asul, Bukhari, the foundation. I'm using the words.
But you asked me an academic question about me personally.
It's not an academic question.
No, hold on a second. You asked me what does hadith based aqidah mean?
Right.
And I gave you an educational approach.
I don't want an educational approach. I want a foundational approach.
No, we have to have an educational approach.
Why?
Because we have to have a way that we're communicating the deen. So I said foundationally to you. I said the Quran itself. And I told you.
Tell me the Quran and the Hadith approach. You don't got to talk about Bukhari. No need.
But listen, I told you the Quran and I said according to Revelation. That's an educational approach.
The first revelation.
But that's an educational approach. You asked me hadith based aqidah. So you're talking now, that becomes an academic question because that wasn't the issue. That is an academic question.
How?
What is hadith based aqidah?
That's an academic question.
Why is it academic?
Why?
I'm going to explain why it's academic. Because the reality of the situation is that concept, hadith-based aqidah, or that type of aqidah, or whether it's Ash'ari aqidah, or whatever it is, did any of that exist in the time period of the Prophet Muhammad?
Right. So we don't need to talk about it.
Right. No, but you asked me that. You asked me if you want to talk about even if I were to say Kitab al-Iman and Bukhari, you still have to have a source, when it comes to hadith. And that's why I said it. I said it the way that I did. I said, knowing exactly what I intended. You know what I'm saying? Books that are hadith based in Aqidah, but mujarrad of hadith. They have no hadith in them. Bayhaqi, I mentioned it, but Bayhaqi, as having hadith based, it has hadith in it. You know what I'm saying? So I gave you different examples of approaches of communicating the knowledge. But now, for instance, leave that aside. But we're going to talk about Bukhari.
Stop. Hold on 1 second. So because people they're trying to follow us. So we keep it. Here's what I mean. All right, follow me. And I'm listening because I listen to you. I want you to listen to me so you can understand what I'm trying to ask. Right? Mm-hmm. When we talk about foundations, the foundation is the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Right.
That means kalam Allah, the speech of Allah. Right. Kalam Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the speech of Rasulullah. Right. Aqwalihi, af'alihi, akhlaqihi wa ahwalihi wa taqriratihi. Right. His sayings, his actions, his characteristics, his state, his tacit approvals. How it reaches us is another story, right? Mm-hmm. It reaches us through al-Bukhari, through al-Bayhaqi.
Right.
That's branches. The asl is there.
Right.
Right? Now, if we want to verify the asl, we can use that. But the asl we agree upon. So when you say a hadith-based approach, that means we're just talking about what the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or what he did, or what was his characteristics, or what was his states. That's hadith based. Now the branches is I took this hadith from this route through al-Bukhari, or through al-Bayhaqi, or through so and so. These are branches. I want from you the approach of the hadith. How does that work? I'll give you an example from my side if you need it. Go ahead. I'll let you go first. If you can't do it, just say I can't do it. Explain to me.
I mean, because now we're getting caught up in the issue of methodology. First of all, in today's time, there's no way to go to the Sunnah without going to the usul of the books. After Nisai, after Imam Nisai, there's nobody relating isnad directly to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're relating hadith back to the usul, which is those books of hadith.
You know that hasn't changed.
After codification of the books of hadith.
All right,
there's nobody.
Even if we say that, and I agree with you, you're talking about these main reliable books of hadith. That's still branches.
No, it's not.
Listen, what I'm
branches, because we're talking about. Are we saying that we're talking about the sunnah, and how are you getting to the sunnah?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go somewhere.
You're talking about how you're getting to the sunnah, and I'm talking about the sunnah. There you go. Yes.
No, I'm talking about the sunnah. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying at this point in time, there's an equivalence between hadith and the sunnah. That's what I'm saying. There's an equivalence between the hadith and the sunnah, unless you're going to bring in the concept that sunnah goes even beyond the hadith. But that's a technical point. So what I'm saying is, if I'm pointing to this, if I'm saying there's a group of these hadith that deal with these issues, say for instance, if you would ask me, well, where do you get your knowledge of the sunnah? We have a definition of what asl is. We have a definition of what foundation is. Define Islamic scholarship. So the foundation is going to be two things. It's going to be either an evidence which is in principle, dalil ijmali, or dalil tafsiri.
These are details. They're not foundational. Did the Prophet ever say ijmali or dalil tafsiri?
That's not the point. We're using language.
Question for me. So we can.
The Prophet never said.
Did the Prophet ever say
dalil? The Prophet never said branches, or the Prophet never said branches or foundation either.
The Prophet laid out foundation.
But the Prophet never divided between sallallahu alaihi wasallam the foundation or the branches. Don't take that on my word. Don't take that on my word. Even go to Shah Wali Allah.
Forget Shah Wali Allah. We don't need
Shah Wali Allah and the Insaf. No, just to say that this is not a new concept.
I'm not talking about that. If you're telling me, let me explain. Let me give you a hadith, because I'm saying this is a hadith-based approach to Aqidah. And tell me, is this your approach? So I'm going to answer my own question. Hadith approach is whenever we have a confirmed statement or action or belief from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I believe in it as it has came without any discussion. Is that a hadith-based approach?
Not necessarily. Because not necessarily. Imam Malik had a hadith-based approach. There was issues that he discussed. Imam Ahmed had a hadith-based approach. There was issues that he discussed.
Is they details or foundational? His discussion.
The discussions are sometimes on detailed points.
About what? When someone's not
maybe some issue of concern. Maybe an issue of concern. For Imam Ahmed, he didn't write much in Aqidah at all. He wrote a little bit because the foundation was the book and the Sunnah.
Exactly. That's my point.
But on that we agree. But the thing about it is that there's also an academic point to that.
Okay, that's the branch. I agree with what I'm trying to get at is once we establish a foundation, right? We don't have to play with ourselves. We can't afford it to play intellectual gymnastics.
Right.
Me and you from the inner city, we know our people. Forget all these details that don't relate to anything we're talking about.
That's why I said foundationally, me personally,
right?
From the angle of teaching the community, and that's what I do in the community that I teach it.
Right.
I teach the Meccan Quran,
right,
as it was revealed,
right.
Without going into the details.
If you
finished the module up, that was something that I brought up. We covered the aspect of usul al-fiqh, in which we're talking about the Arabic language, the concept of metaphor, right? So the reality of this situation is that, you can't, there's certain things that you can't understand unless you have the tools to understand them. So to eliminate from the people those types of debates, I told you very clearly from the beginning, There's certain things that are foundational with regard to the usul of aqidah, right? With regard to tazkiyah, and I mentioned to you, I said foundationally, the Quran,
right,
which everybody evades. Everybody evades. I'll be honest with you.
debate.
Everybody's evading making the Quran the central text that they're teaching from.
I agree. That's why I said go back to the bread.
Right. And so, for instance, if we bring this to the table and we say, well, foundationally, let's deal with the Quran. Everybody's going off into this book and that book. We understand that there's differences of understanding certain ayat of the Quran, but the Quran is not a book which is a mess.
I agree.
That's the issue that we have to get around.
Let me give you a foundation.
There may be a point. There may be a point of language where there may be disagreement, but the Quran is not a mess, and I say that emphatically because we've tried to make the Quran like it's a mess, and so the language.
Not me and you.
Yeah. So the issue. That's why I said, if you want to get out of the debate, we should be focusing on the Meccan Quran from the angle of developing our understanding, you know what I'm saying? Developing our spiritual life and developing our character. And then there's a certain point where we can start talking about other details. That's why I said they become academic. That's why I said I gave to you some academic references. But I've made it clear to you foundationally, and I'm unapologetic on that issue.
Right, go ahead.
The issue of Aqidah, it can be handled by the Quran. It can be handled by the
Quran.
Right. I don't need Ibn Taymiyyah for that. I don't need Imam Tahawi for that. I don't need Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab for that. The Quran itself, if it's dealt with properly, you understand what I'm saying, respectfully, according to its objectives and goals, that's it.
That's what I'm trying to say. That's what
I'm saying. Now the issue comes. How are we going to understand the Quran? So then we have to respect the issue that our people in the early generation, they outlined that the Sunnah interprets the Quran.
We agree with that. There's no disagreement with that.
And that's why I said it's foundational. Everything after that is going to be, if we deal with certain ayah of the Quran,
right?
If we're going to be academic about it,
right?
You're going to say, well, in this ayah there's a ta'weed.
You said that. I didn't say that.
No, but I'm saying that if we're going to be academic, you committed to being Ash'ari.
You don't understand Ash'ari. That's a whole nother discussion. You don't. I'm telling you don't understand the Ash'ari school at all.
Listen. I studied Ash'ari Aqidah. But I studied Ash'ari Aqidah. I don't want to get into that, but I studied Ash'ari Aqidah from Ash'ari Mashaykh in Azhar al-Sharif.
Habibi, at the feet of Ash'ari scholars all around the world since I was 18 years old.
I'm not debating that, but when you tell me that I haven't studied Ash'ari Aqidah, I'm telling you that I'm exposed.
All right, listen to what I'm saying. Stop. Share with me.
And so,
how long?
So the issue. Okay, hold on. Let me ask you one question.
You first and then me. Go ahead, ask the question.
No, go ahead.
Okay, see, we learning in Solve. Honestly, how long have you been exposed to Ash'ari Aqidah from scholars? How many years? Roughly. Just roughly.
Years now.
How many? Question. How many?
It's been about 15 years in that.
15 years.
Yeah, 15 years.
I've been exposed for 30 years. Listen,
that's fine. That's fine. Numbers here.
No. Listen.
It's not the issue.
Just
methodology is the issue.
Listen, just by time, and you know this, I'm talking about you, just by time and experience, if you only spent 15 years and I spent 30, just by time and exposure, I'm going to know some stuff you don't. Is that true?
No problem with that. I don't have a problem with that.
All right, stop. So when I say that, when I'm listening to you and I'm saying you don't understand the Ash'ari school well.
But hold on a second. But if you're telling me,
go ahead.
Okay. If you're telling me that in the Ash'ari school, if you're telling me that ta'weed, in the Ash'ari school, you only have two madhabs, tafweed and ta'weed.
Okay.
if I mention that when we come to the ayat of the Quran, and I'm saying we have a foundation, which is the Quran, and I'm saying the only difference may be that there may be an ayat of the Quran that we may get to. We understand the foundation of the Arabic language at a basic level. We can agree with it because the Arabic language too is not all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Then after a certain point, we may say you may take the route of tafweed or ta'weed, but primarily most of the Asharis are doing ta'weed, or it may be the issue of ithbat, and then the issue of ithbat is going to come into two schools of thought on that. And so that's what I'm saying. At the end of the day, most of the Quran is not all over the place. And the point of saying that is that foundationally, there may be some points in which there's a discussion, but majority of it is not going to be a discussion because the Quran is not all over. That was the point of saying that. It wasn't a point to go back and forth into academics.
No, I agree. That's the point I want us to get to. I wanted to get to what you're saying. And what I'm trying to tell you, what you're saying, I agree with, but stop leaving what you're saying. You're saying let's stick to the foundation of the Quran. Let's stick to the foundation of the Hadith.
And we agree with that. And I'm saying, and I'm emphasizing for the listeners and for us, and for those who want to refute and rebuttal and create other issues. No, it's important. No, hold on a second, but that's important to understand because the ideas come out. Ideas come out. And they say, but what about this? What about that? So then to lay down the proper foundations, because we're having this dialogue for us to build brotherhood.
Exactly.
Establish what foundations are. And then at the same time to teach the people because they have been already taught to clash each other. And look, hold on a second. Okay, if you come to an ayah, whether it's istawa al-arsh or that Allah has a hand or whatever, the issue is going to come back down to you only have certain paths to deal with that.
Okay, and that's foundational path.
And these schools of thought. And the schools of thought. At a basic level of the Arabic language, there's clarity.
I get that. These are all
that was the only point that I was saying. And I was saying that in defense of the Quran to say that, look, the Quran is sufficient. If people want to go into academics, then yeah. And when you go into academics, you're going to only be going into academics in a couple areas. That's what I'm saying.
Do you know we agree, right?
There's no doubt we agree on the point. We're saying we're telling each other that we agree on the issue.
We agree, me and you, we agree on a foundation, right? We differ on branches only because we didn't establish clearly the foundation. Follow what I just said. You write that down, please, so you don't forget it for me. Write it as I said it. We agree on a foundation. We disagree on branches. And the only reason we disagree on branches because we haven't clearly established the foundation. Do you follow me?
No, on that I disagree.
Okay.
Because we agree on the foundation.
Before you disagree, before you disagree, tell me what I just said.
That we agree on the foundation and we disagree on the branches because we didn't clarify what the foundation is.
That's what I said. Now go ahead. Tell me why you disagree with that.
Because the foundational principle. First of all, let me tell you something to share with you. On these types of issues, I have a methodology.
Okay.
I established it from the beginning. There is the issue when the differences come up amongst the ulama. And this is a point of academics. Imam Ibn Rushd, what's the methodology? Bidayat al-Mujtahid. I use the same methodology. You're going to have a majority opinion. You're going to have a minority opinion. You're going to have what's the reasons where they overlap together, where there's common ground between that majority and minority, where they differ and why. And so, for instance, when you tell me that we disagree on branches, no, We don't disagree on branches. I thought we established that at the foundational level was clear of the Arabic language we agree on. And then after that, there's maybe some differences or whatever.
Okay.
Because that's where there's no way that we can get around that. Because when we start talking about the principles of dealing with the Arabic language, that's not from the branches. That's from the usul. And I committed before. When I came on, I committed.
That's not true.
I committed before. It's from the usul. And
that's
I committed. It is from the usul.
You want me to prove to you that's not true? Here's the foundation. Stop. Listen to me.
I'm listening. I'm listening.
Here's the foundation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa.
Okay.
You disagree with that?
How can I disagree with that? That's in the Quran.
Because the foundation, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, in explaining that verse in the Quran, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Do you disagree with that? Yes or no?
First of all, it's not an issue of agreeing or disagreeing on that point.
Go ahead. That's the Quran, right?
That's what I'm saying. It's not an issue of agreeing or disagreeing on that. We're talking Quran. We believe in it. So that's not a matter. It's not a matter of debate.
No, it ain't. Follow me. That's foundational, right? You agree? I didn't.
But that's. I don't want to involve the Quran in the debate.
It's not a debate.
But we agree that that's Quran.
Okay, and we agree that all that is correct, right?
No, we agree that's Quran. We agree that.
Slow down.
I'm removing myself from that logic. We agree that's Quran. We believe that's Quran. We're not going to debate whether it's correct or not. We agree it's Quran.
Stop. Listen to me. Listen to me. Imam Yusuf, listen.
I'm listening.
I'm listening. I want you to follow me because I'm trying to get the foundation. Disagree. I want to get out of disagreement. The only way we're going to disagreement when we learn where we agree. We have to learn where we agree.
But we don't. But let's be more clear and simple without getting into a logical structure where we're going to go with a point to prove a point. We already know that we agree in the Quran because we believe in it. What I'm saying is that I don't want to get into an argument talking about.
We're not going to argue. We're never going to argue.
I'm saying that foundationally we agree on that.
Okay, so that's our foundation.
Let's move on. Where's the issue that you have?
I'm going. Let's establish the foundation first. Listen. All right,
that's what I'm saying to you. I want to make sure that everybody understands.
All right, let's make sure
establishing what the foundation is already there. If you want to use that language, fine.
All right, listen. Follow me. Follow me. Follow me. Everyone listening, follow us. Number one, we're going to agree. We're going to get some agreement here. We love each other. We are brothers. We're not arguing. I agree. Do you?
We agree.
Okay, so we're never arguing. Never. Even if we have exchange, we're not arguing. We're just trying to clarify and strengthen our brotherhood, right?
Right.
And we have different approaches to do that, right?
Right.
And we're going to find a foundation by which we can build upon, right? You with me?
Yeah, we agreed that we have a foundation to build upon. The foundation is the Quran. The only reason why I got like that with you,
stop overthinking.
I don't want people taking away from this a debate with the ayat of the Quran. That's
not a debate. We never debate.
I'm not saying. I'm understanding where you're coming from.
All right, so forget the audience. We're talking about me and you.
Forget the audience.
No,
you said we have to be responsible.
Why do I say forget the audience? Eventually, we say to the audience, be patient, right?
Okay.
Me and you, be patient. We already starting from the premise, even the audience, most of the time, they're used to us disagreeing. That's known. Me and you, are going to show the audience how to go from disagreement to agreement.
Right. And so that's why I'm saying at that foundational level, everybody, where are you from?
Right.
You have to submit to the fact that's Quran.
Right.
Those
That's
ayat that you mentioned, that's Quran.
Right.
Right.
I agree.
We agree with that.
Right.
We agree with that from an issue of aqidah.
Right.
We don't, you know, so that we can't play with.
Right. I agree.
Deny, if we want to get technical, to deny those types of issues takes us outside of Islam.
Agreed. If we disagree about the text of the Quran and Sunnah that is firm and established, that takes us out of Islam.
Technically, that's mutawatir.
Okay, forget the technical terms. However you establish a hadith or the Quran, that's another story, that's a branch. But once it is established that this is the Quran and this is the hadith of the Prophet, so to negate it is wrong. It will take us out of Islam. When we're talking about firmly confirmed statements, no doubt about it, no difference of opinion, this is the hadith of the Prophet, this is the verse of Quran. If you go outside of that, that is kufr. We agree, right? Now we're not talking about how you can.
I would add.
Come on, man.
Not for debate's sake, but for the sake of stability. And I would say the transmission of the Quran is not a branch issue, because we can technically say that it's consensus, it's soundness. For those who have brought up, and especially in these days, that have brought up the whole issue of questioning the authenticity of the Quran, which became a debate recently.
Right.
The issue of the Quran is beyond tawatur, really. It's ijma'. It's ijma', and so that, and I'm saying that because when we talk about the yaqiniyat, whether you want to use Ashari terms, that which is certain, it is that book, the transmission of that book. There's no debate with regard to the authenticity of that book.
And
only differences
that applies to certain hadith of the Prophet as well. You're in my field.
Not at the level of ijma', but yes.
Listen.
Yes, we agree. We agree.
You're in my field. This is my area. When you start talking about narrations and canon, you're in my field. So that argument you use for the Quran is the same argument for the hadith. The same discussion. So we ain't arguing about that. No matter how you do it, as Muslims, we know the Quran is from Allah and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is from Allah. How we know that is through transmission. We got that. And there are multiple ways of transmission. This is well known. This is ma'ruf. The best scholars in our ummah are my teachers in this field. So I got it. We don't got to talk about that. Those are branches. Once we establish that the Quran is the word of Allah and the kalam of the Messenger of Allah, which is confirmed, is from Allah to revelation to the Prophet. We're not arguing about that. Muslims, that's not a discussion. Here is my discussion.
So that's clear in the deen, right?
Of course.
Okay. So then,
can I be Muslim without this being clear?
Right. So then that becomes another foundational part of understanding.
Let me hold your point. We are not debating. We're both brothers from the inner city. This how we dialogue. We having our rap battle.
People think we're debating.
Yeah, they're mistaken. But we got to show them we're not debating. We can talk without art, because we're going to get to a foundation. The only way we ever going to agree if we have our discussions. You talked about marriage. Let's get light for a minute. Why do most spouses have fights? They don't sit down and talk and try to solve their differences. That's why they fight. That's why the marriage ends. So if we taught them how to listen and talk and everybody express, no one feel confined, I can say whatever's on my chest, and eventually we're going to find a medium ground, right? But we got to go through the discussion. We got to have it. That's fine. It's not an argument. It's not a debate. I love you. You love me. We're an ummah. We love each other. These are foundational things. If I don't love you, something's wrong with my iman. If you don't love me, something's wrong with your iman. Like you said, Usama bin Zayd, did you check his heart? I don't know what's in your heart. You said, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. I say, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. We're brother. We're brothers. That's our foundation. Now, the details of how we understand, that's another story. But as far as I'm concerned, you a Muslim. As far as you're concerned, I'm a Muslim. And we know basic rights. We love each other. So therefore, we can debate and discuss and differ, but it all going to come back to love. It has to. As Muslims, we have to. If it ends up in hatred and animosity, we're not practicing Islam. Right or wrong?
I believe that. I believe that if we can have disagreements, it doesn't have to get to that point of hating each other.
And me and you, as leaders, have to be examples of that. So no one should understand that we're debating. We're not debating. We're discussing issues and we're trying to resolve them. That takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But what we're used to seeing people doing is they can't disagree and still talk. Once we disagree, I'm done with you. Kafir, Mubtadi', Fasik, Kharij al-Manhaj, disbeliever, innovator, corrupt person, outside the minhaj. This is not how we should act. We're going to disagree and we're going to say, all right, we're finished right now. We didn't come to resolve this issue. Next time we talk, we'll pick up, we'll continue. Do you understand my point? So once we got that, there's no argument. Now, let me go back to the point. So once we got that, there's no need to, we're going to talk till we die because we're going to be brothers till we die. So we got the rest of our life to what? Reason with each other, right? When we die, it's over, right? When death comes, that's when we finish. Our discussion is ibadah because we have good intentions. It's a form of ibadah, right?
Unless we make it into Jannah, we continue the conversation over there.
I'm not talking to you about this in general. Right? If I make it, we ain't having this discussion. We better finish this on earth. Right? And when I say debate, Imam Wesley, that's your people, right?
Yeah, that's my peeps. Yeah, that's my peeps.
It's a debate, a respectful one. So debate Islamically is nothing wrong. We study al-bahthu wal-munadhara, right? You know this, right?
Yeah.
It's a field of study, right? So
and that was the point of saying, that was the point of working throughout to say there's stuff that's clear.
Right.
There's stuff that Muslims agree on.
So
there's
I'm
stuff that's foundation.
bring Imam Wesley to join in. That's your man.
Bring him in.
I can't bring him in now. The next discussion, Imam Wesley, inbox me, your email, you in. He's Spanish brother too, right?
Puerto Rican brother.
Puerto Rican, right? All right, that's some technical terms. We ain't Spanish.
No, we're not Spanish.
Yes, you did. Some of them said y'all from Andalus. All right, listen. Here's what I mean. So, because he had a lot of comments, but it's not fair that he's an imam. So with respect, he shouldn't be in the crowd. He should be on here and we could talk, right? Because what I'm saying is, I need us to learn where we agree. Once we learn where we agree, then we can work on where we disagree.
Right.
And if we start from disagreement and preconceived notions, then we're never going to agree. You understand my point?
If we started from disagreement, then that means we didn't have the correct methodology.
Exactly.
That means we're calling Islam into question at the foundational level.
Exactly.
Saying that the foundational level is all full of irregularities.
Right.
And that was the point.
Yeah, you ain't good in the crowd.
As a source, huh?
Imam Wesley talking about, I'm good in the crowd. Sheikh, la. You have to come up front. Right? No hiding in the crowd. If you hide in the crowd, I'm going to bring you out anyway. You got to get on stage. Now I'm joking. No, we have to do this. And those who are willing participants, we got to do it. The more, the merrier. We're trying to do what you're talking about. We can't run from this. No hiding. You know what I'm saying? You know what we do? Because you're from Philly, I'm from Jersey. You know the streets. Sometimes, if we don't settle, people gonna die. If we look, you a lion, I'm a lion. Either we learn to live in this jungle in peace, or we gonna eat each other and destroy it for everybody. We can't do that.
Right.
We can't. So no running. If you don't know, we gotta love each other. If I don't know, I don't know. If I know, we're gonna discuss it. Not running. Right? That's what I tell a lot of them brothers. They be like, well, the Ash'ari. I'm not a punk Ash'ari. I'm not. I'm not a punk. I will stand, if necessary, to talk about the issue. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I want to be right. So don't get my passion mixed up for my search for truth. You understand what I mean? Nah, we gotta talk. You saying I'm a deviant. I don't want to be nothing you. I don't want to be a deviant. I want to make it to Jannah. So me and you don't have this discussion. But I'm not going to get there if I don't have the discussion. If I don't understand what I'm doing, then I'm going to just be in a mess. That's why people don't come to the masjid. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. I don't listen to him. I don't. Why? Because they don't understand.
This was the original point that we talked about.
Right.
That we have changed, we have destroyed a reality of the deen for people, which is the house of Allah being a space that you can go to and you can worship Allah. We have destroyed that with the way that we deal with certain issues. And so as a consequence of that, we block the means for people to be able to come to the house of Allah. Like that's a number one bid'ah. There's no such concept that the house of Allah Ta'ala is not open for people to come to Allah. That and that has become the issue, that you're talking about barring people from coming to the house of Allah.
So it's our job as imams to fix it. That's a mas'uliyah on our necks. If we don't, you know what I mean? That's a responsibility. Somebody messed it up, it's our job to fix it. We have that responsibility, and we cannot flee from it. You can't come and say it's a mess.
That is, I mean, if you want to talk about that that has two aspects to it. That has the aspect where it's foundational from the angle that the masjid is part of our lives,
right?
And then it falls into how it's dealt with in the branches because of how people deal with those issues. But I don't think anybody disagrees that you can pray even behind a person that they classify as Ahl al-Bid'ah, unless you're just on the extreme of denying that.
I agree.
I don't think anybody's saying that you can't make salah behind the person. That is, if you declare the person from Ahl al-Bid'ah, unless it's just clear that they're mushrik or something.
Right. But
I don't see anyone being able to put a delil, you know what I'm saying, that's clear, that's qat'i, that whether you're Ash'ari or Salafi, that you can't be prayed behind.
But here's the point. Unless it reaches to someone considering the other kafir, and that happens. So that's another story, but that's what happens.
But that's an issue. That's another issue. Now you consider the person outside of Islam.
I said that's another issue. I said that's another issue. But that's the only reason that would happen. You're right.
So then the general understanding is that you could pray behind people.
I agree.
So there's no legitimacy for emptying out the house of Allah.
No one disagrees with that. That's not a disagreement. That's not a disagreement. So the asl is the same. The branches. Now, when do you consider where the foggy era comes? When do you consider someone just an innovator or outside of the fold of Islam? That's where the gray area is. Not that the innovator, you don't pray behind him. That's not the discussion.
But Imam Amin, we can't consider, we should be clear on this point, that you can't consider majority of the masajid not spaces to go to.
No one says that. I'm just telling you where the root of the disagreement is. I'm not talking about.
I'm not saying that you say that. I'm not putting that in your mouth.
Yeah.
I'm saying we have a community that's on that methodology.
I know, and it's our job to fix it. That's why we're having this discussion. You and Imam, you studied in Azhar. Listen, you and Imam, you studied. And I hear the teachers you mentioned, and I know of them. These were great learned people, scholars, ulama in our time. Real ulama, respected around the world. You didn't sit with them for nothing. You sat with them to learn and go do da'wah. Do da'wah. You gotta help.
But this is what we're saying, that of a foundational point, and it's an issue of Aqidah as well.
Right.
We can't separate the masjid from our lives.
We agree. No one disagrees with that.
And so
even the one who does it doesn't disagree with what you're saying.
But what we're finding is that the houses of Allah, this was something that you alluded to, you know, and what we're finding is that the houses of Allah, all this stuff has come to the point where people are not even going to the masjid.
I agree. Our job to fix it.
Right.
But we're only going to fix it by first discovering the problem, discussing the problem, analyzing the problem, and coming up with a solution. You cannot do that without talking. Impossible. Do you see my point?
No, I mean, there's no debate there at all.
So what we're doing, which is not commonly done, especially in our circles, is we're initiating that process. And we got to be patient and comfortable with it. We got to talk. I can't feel that if I disagree with Imam Yusuf, it's lights out. It's not lights out. Actually, it's the beginning of lights on, if we're sincere, right? We've made
that's what we would hope.
And that's what we're going to do. And that's our job to show it. And we're going to bring Brother Imam Wesley to help. That's your man, right? Y'all ain't beefing, right?
That's my brother.
Huh?
That's my brother.
I just want to make sure you guys be beefing all over the place. Like, no, but with all of us together, we have enough knowledge, we do, to begin the discussion. Right? All we got to do is have respect for each other. We can disagree, that's fine, but we keep discussing till we get some foundational principles, we establish them, and then that becomes Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. That becomes a foundation which we build upon, right? But we can't expect everybody to do that because everybody ain't even there, right? You know that.
And everybody doesn't have that concern or that willingness.
Right. So the ones who do have it got to do the work for everybody else. We got to set the platform, right? So when we can walk away, because I know, especially you, if we take the time and we talk, me and you gonna walk away totally agreed. But we can't be afraid to discuss the disagreement, because I believe the disagreement between us is a disagreement of knowledge and understanding. That's it. Once we establish knowledge and understanding, right? Because I listen to you, right? I listened to you. You said that the book Al-Iman by Al-Bayhaqi, you used the Muqtasar that you had, right? You're reading the book of Al-Bayhaqi. You're quoting, you're teaching the book Al-Bayhaqi, right? Al-Bayhaqi was Ash'ari, was Shafi'i, was Sufi, right? So obviously that ain't your issue. Truth is truth, and if it's extreme to you, it's extreme. I don't negate because you have an extreme point that you speak in truth. That's obvious. That's your practice. Okay, that isn't for me to say, see, he's studying Ash'ari, and he studies Shafi'i, and no. That means he wants truth. Wherever he finds truth, he's going to accept it. That's good for both of us to be like that, right? Once we establish that, but what would some do? Some would deny actual facts just to promote their stuff. They know this is true, but they're going to hide it. So a guy is talking about, I'm on al-jarh wa ta'dil, mathalan, Just right as an example. And all the ulama of Jarh wa Ta'dil were Ash'ariyah, most of them, the main figures were Ash'ariyah, people of madhab, and all of them were Sufis. But you rely on them in weighing and investigating narrators, but you just say they was all deviant, and you won't even talk about their position. That's not fairness, right? You won't even have that discussion. It's not fair. And when it's not fair, it leads to a bigger picture in our communities. When it gets down to the ground, now we're fighting over stuff we shouldn't be fighting about. We should learn to do what you do and to be fair and to be honest, not just pushing my agenda and then lie to the people. No, this is real. This is the truth. And I see things this way. Now we discuss that. That's fine. But we're not going to lie and fabricate just for our agenda. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about, there's certain limitations that people have. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. There's even when it comes to the same thing, you have that problem across the board. When you talk about Abi Zayd al-Qaywan, Abi Zayd al-Qaywan has a statement that most Asharis don't agree with. Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala istawa ala al-arsh bidati. You know what I'm saying? That and you'll find that Asharis will teach the book. They have serviced the book. And when it comes to the issue, say we disagree on this particular statement, on this
keep going, right?
particular point, and they keep moving on.
So that's an example, right?
Imam Ibn al-Qayyim explained, the book of Imam al-Harari,
which is Sufism, but they don't say that.
So there's there's no, the problem is the issue that we have.
Imam Yusuf, I need you to make that statement just for victory's sense. That book is a book of what? Come on, I'm just messing with you. A book of Tasawwuf. Come on, be honest.
It's a book of Tazkiyat enough, brother.
Stop it.
I can't give you the glory.
But we got to be honest,
bro. AC doesn't get that punch. AC doesn't get that punch. It's a book that has Tasawwuf in it. That's a great point.
Okay.
There's a point. Is a point where it has benefit. It has knowledge.
Exactly. That's what we need in our people, on both ends.
The problem is that if you can't navigate what has sound evidence, where there's differences of opinion, if you can't acknowledge that Imam al-Bukhari has narrated from people of bid'ah, we can play the gymnastics all day long. You know what I'm saying? But the reality is that the ulama, they navigated.
Right.
They navigated and they dealt with principles.
Right. And guess what? To get to what you want to get to and which I want to get to, over time, not overnight, we got to go through that so we can become like them, and then we can build our communities.
Ibn Qudama, whether it was in Aqidah, whether it was in Tazkiyat al-Nafs, Minhaj al-Qasidin, or whether it was in the issue of usul, al-fiqh, Rawda and usul, he rooted himself in Ghazali. Where he differed from him, he differed from him.
Right.
It's not my problem that our brothers can't handle that.
But me and you can, and we can, and we're proving we can, and what we can do, because we're concerned about our communities. It's about across the country, especially these indigenous communities. Man, we're being destroyed from dunya-wise and from deen-wise. We got to fix this stuff. We have to. And we can't be hasty about it. We got to get it over right now. No, I don't work that way. We got a lot of stuff we got to clarify, and it takes time. So I got to go. I'm sorry. We're reaching the 2-hour mark, right? And I only agreed 1 hour. But this is the first. If you would like, if you have time, and we'll talk after this on the phone, so we can, not right this minute. Later on, I'll call you. We can do tomorrow after my class, I'm free for a little bit more if we want to continue and narrow it down if you have the time. Do you have the time?
We could work it. I want the people to understand we're conversating. We're not debating.
Nah, Imam Wesley said we're debating.
we have, there's some ethos, we have some soul to us. So of course some emotion is going to come out.
Exactly.
But, it's not we're not debating because, we're not debating in deen.
Right. And we agree. And guess what? I really believe if we do this, it's going to take time. No one from outside of us can dictate this conversation. What do I mean? This is a conversation between indigenous Muslims who are concerned about the condition of our people. No one who doesn't have that concern can enter this conversation. You follow my point?
I think for us, I'll go out on the edge and say that that's foundational. I think it's foundational in this.
Say that again.
I'll say that it's foundational because we have a concern for our people.
Right.
So even if the brothers are from our community, but with no concern for our people and building up our people, they don't come in this circle because we're not on the same foundation.
Right.
They're not concerned with our people.
Exactly.
And this is, people can call it tribalism, they can call it whatever, you know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, we have a responsibility to our people, to both Muslim and non-Muslim. If you can bring a proof from the Quran and the Sunnah against that, you can have another discussion outside. But for us, that's foundational.
I agree. Because you know what? I'm going to tell you something I realized, right? And I'm in the circles with the traditional crowd. I like that term. I like the term, but I hate it because that ain't traditional. This stuff you see is disgusting, but that's a whole nother discussion. But they call it the traditional crowd. You know what we in the traditional crowd, the indigenous Muslims in the traditional crowd, we're fighting against that harder than you are. You just don't know it. That concept of this idea of what traditional Islam is, we are totally opposed to that. Those of us who have traveled and studied and have scholars and sheikhs and asanid, what we see breaks our heart. So our job is now, you know what our teachers told us? Take the reins. Stop letting people alter the tradition. Take the reins. Do not allow them to formulate the discussion. They're doing a bad job. That's what you're doing. From your aspect, you've seen the detriment of the way this has been put forth, and you're grabbing the reins, right? You're grabbing the reins. I'm doing the same thing. Me and you can have an offline discussion. In the dunya, it was another way we did it. But that's an offline discussion. No, we have to. In the dunya, you can't come in my neighborhood and do nothing. Forget about it. You can't. I don't care who you is, who you are, who's your crew. You can't come in this part and do nothing. That's how we got down. Right? To the very last man. For us, we got to stop letting people harm our communities, even if they say they're Muslim. But we got to put a foundation by which our community understand why we're like that. And it got to be clear as the sun on a noonday. You follow? And I believe we can do it. I believe we can. If I didn't believe it, I wouldn't waste my time. I believe people like you, and there are others, we have to redefine what this picture is. It's another phase in our communities that we got to do. And I hear you all the time. That's why you always on Zaytuna and Lamppost, because you don't think they're representing it right. That's why you on their back, not because you hate them, right?
No, I don't hate the brothers. I have nothing.
And I'm going
to make that a personal. Let me make that
personal
clarification.
Go ahead.
Khalil Mohsen, I love you, brother.
Ooh.
Dr. Abdullah Hamid Ali, I love you, brother. You understand what I'm saying? Even I have love for Sheikh Hamza Yusuf.
Right.
Where we can't get down is your political stance with regard to blaming our people for their condition. Other than that, you know, that's your, and I say it all the time. Look, and I've even mentioned it, put it on the record. We see what you're trying to do. You're trying to create a moral reform. We wish you success in that. We don't agree with your alignment with Trump, but we need a program. If you think that that works, show and prove with the program. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and go to war with you outside of that. I just make sure you're not blaming our people, you know what I'm saying, and stay out of our way. You know what I'm saying, and what we're trying to do. But don't come trying to knock other people trying to service the community if you don't have anything to put in place. You know, that's the bottom line. That's where we're at.
And here, trust me, this discussion is going to go all over the place, right? And what it's going to do, it's going to reach those people who have similar hearts, right? And we'll be able to expand.
And I want to repeat that again. Brothers, Khalil Mohsen, Dr., and I'm calling you Dr. Sheikh, Bila Mubalagha, Abdullah Hamid Ali, you earned it. I love you for the sake of Allah. I understand what you tried to do. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not going to put negative intentions. There's just certain moves. Don't inject things that are not in there. If I'm telling you openly that I love you, we can have disagreements. Malcolm and Martin disagree with each other.
But so eventually I'm going to try to talk him. I already asked him, but I'm going to try to talk him eventually because we should continue this. We should make this an environment, right? You notice I didn't put it on Black Imams Roundtable. I just put it, it's on, this is our site. I just put it on so we can just have we open. It ain't my field, it ain't your field, we kicking it. We brothers, right? And our job is to stop the war that's on our community. We can't get a break. In the dunya, in the deen, everywhere we go, they on us. Now, some of us got to be lions and say, we're going to protect our people, right? And we're going to figure it out. So, are you available for tomorrow?
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Talk, Imam Wesley. I want to bring him too. So, it's out. Put him on the, you got the, send me his email, or he send me his email, and I'm going to send a link because we're trying to reason. He got points. Y'all brothers, especially with our Puerto Rican brothers, right? Because y'all marginalized too, and I know it, right? And y'all going to have the same problem the Black community been experiencing for decades now. Y'all are on the way to that same thing, right? And you know it. The certain ideas are becoming prevalent in your community, and don't repeat a vicious cycle. Y'all have the ability to put things together, right? You know what I'm saying? So let's sit down and dialogue. And I'm gonna bring other imams, and I've been talking to them because I wasn't ignoring you. I just was making sure that you were ready for these kind of conversations because I'm a straightforward person. I don't run, right? That's not in my nature. If we had to have a discussion, and that discussion was going to save lives, I would fight for that discussion. You follow what I'm saying?
And I think that's where we're at.
Right.
We're survivable, you know, and if not, you know, that's what I personally.
I'm down. And that's why I said I'm with you. We are in survival mode, but our job is to make that happen. And it's hard. Trust me, it's hard. If you know my Islamic background, it's not easy. It took me a long time and a lot of pain to get where I'm at today. And I still got a long way to go, right? You know about me, and you'll get to meet me and know, bro, ferocious in refuting and arguing and debating. Before it was popular, bro, that's what I was doing, right? So I know that don't work. It doesn't help, right? My community, the way my community got the way it is through war, fighting. That's how we got to be able to do what we had to do. We had to be willing to put our lives on the line. Because that was the approach that was coming to us. That Salafi approach was blood lawful. That was the discussion. So I know how it go. Literally, some of those students of knowledge, sheikhs, they said, Amin Muhammad halal al-dam. I know. And I said, Tayyib, you're not halal al-dam, but there's going to be something else you come with that. Right? So I understand. I understand fully. Let us do it. So call brother Imam Wesley and tell him, yo, we need you, bro. All soldiers on deck. All right? In closing, I can't take comments. I gotta go. Seriously, I'm way above. Tomorrow, we'll look. Could you do me a favor? Look all of the questions, and if you got time throughout the day, you always on Facebook, right? That was a shot. Right? Go back and answer some of those questions, and as I get time, I'm gonna shoot in too, so we keep the dialogue going. But if whatever you don't get, tomorrow we'll come back. So I'm gonna try to block out a little bit the time, at least 2 hours after my class. I finish at 8:30 tomorrow again, and we just continue the discussion.
Inshallah.
And we open. Barakallahu fikum. Close us out with dua. In your hands.
We ask Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala to open our hearts and to increase us in understanding and knowledge, and to forgive us for our sins, and to remove from us those obstacles that maintain enmity between our hearts. And we ask Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala to preserve our community and to guide us to what's right, and to preserve our dignity, to uplift us. And we ask most of all that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala allow deen to sustain us before we go out of this world, and for our youth and for the generations to come. We send salawat on the Prophet Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim wa barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim fil alamin innaka Hamidum Majid.
In closing, wallahi inni uhibbukum billah. I love you for the sake of Allah. By Allah.
May the one that you love me for love you.
Barakallahu bikum. See you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.